Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Football Podcast. There is no off-season here. College football, NFL, we're a week plus into free agency. We're less than 50 days until the NFL draft. We've got March Madness right around the corner, literally, as there are first four games actually happening right now in this moment as we speak to you. We'll have our March Madness special later tonight that you'll be seeing on Wednesday. You'll likely be listening to this episode itself on Thursday or sometime in the next couple days. Welcome back, guys. We've got a ton of football discussion to get into. More free agency. We're asking one question for every team in the NFL. This will be a recurring series throughout the next couple of weeks as we lead up right into the NFL draft into the month of April. My name is Michael Wein, and joining me tonight, as always, is my fantastic co-host, Mr. Emmy Nixon. Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate all our listeners and our subscribers. Spread the word. We greatly appreciate that as well. Emmy Nixon, how are you tonight, man?
I'm doing great. I've had a really awesome last couple days, honestly. On Sunday, I went to see Tyler the Creator, one of my favorite artists, and honestly, after that performance Sunday might be my favorite artist, to be honest. That dude is just he's incredible. Like, oh my gosh. Comment question of the day for y'all is who's the best artist you've ever seen live and why? Because I don't go to concerts often. I'm more of a NBA game, sports game kind of guy. But holy shite, that was incredible to watch. And then of course Texas made it into March Madness, which we'll get into later tonight on our March Madness bracket episode. So stay tuned for that episode. We're recording kind of back to back here, so that episode will be coming out later this week as well.
The episode will need to have a quick turnaround as the tournament starts on Thursday. So we'll get that up tomorrow, and we'll have this episode up soon after that as well. Let's jump right into the football discussion. We've got 8 NFL teams we're asking questions about tonight. They're mixed throughout the league, so it's kind of randomized. One question for every team. We came up with these questions organically in our pre-podcast meetings that we had this weekend. And we'll continue this over the next couple weeks, as I said. And then at the end, I have a very interesting Texas football recruiting update that you guys are going to want to tune into. And we're also going to continue talking about Longhorns in the NFL, as Emmy will be talking about a special Longhorn to a lot of Longhorns fans' hearts that had an up and down rookie season. So I'll ask you the first question here tonight. We'll start with the team that's picking number 1 in the NFL draft as it currently stands. That could change here in the next couple of weeks. You never know. The Titans. Do you think the Titans should draft Abdul Carter at number 1? Or do you think this is a trade down spot for Tennessee with their new general manager, Mike Gorbanzi, who was the assistant general manager with the Kansas City Chiefs? What do you think?
Well, I think with the Titans right now, their free agency moves have indicated that they're going more towards the quarterback route, particularly for Cam Ward. It seems that, well, it doesn't seem, it's a fact that Cam Ward is the consensus number 1 quarterback in this draft. And based on the moves the Titans made in free agency, going and getting a Dan Moore Jr., whether you like that move or not, they went out and were aggressive in getting their franchise left tackle so that J.C. Latham can move back to his natural position of right tackle, so improve 2 key positions on their offensive line in one move there. And they made moves in free agency to address their defensive line as well. So the one missing piece right now Well, I say that in quotes because there's a lot of things this team needs to do. But for the sake of this draft, I think Cam Ward is the pick for the Titans. Obviously, they're going to be picking up the phone for the Giants. The Giants are probably going to be very desperate and moving heaven and earth to get up to that number one pick. But if I'm the Titans, unless it's an offer that I absolutely cannot refuse, I'm taking Cam Ward at number one.
Okay. I mean, I can't argue with it. I think if you're the Titans and you truly, in your heart of hearts, don't believe that a Will Levis or anybody else you have in that quarterback room is the guy, you throw a dart at the dartboard, and the best bet in this draft, I think by a decent margin, is Cam Ward. With what he showed on tape at Miami and at Washington State, and just with his overall talents, plug him into this offense with your newly acquired left tackle and Dan Moore, who, I mean, I'll give him his flowers, has grown every single year in the NFL as a fourth-round pick out of Texas A&M, and
Absolutely.
has been battle-tested in the NFL as a left tackle playing in the AFC North for the first 4 years of his career. Congratulations to him getting his money. I think it was 4 years, $82 million, over $20
Yep.
million a year, with some like $40 or $50 million guaranteed off the top of my head. That's incredible for where he started. Getting that second contract, you plug him in, you make a couple other additions on this offense, and maybe you're cooking with a little bit of grease if Cam Ward hits. You got to hit on the quarterback, though. And if you do, I think outside of Houston, and the Texans have some questions to answer themselves right now along their offensive line and a couple other parts of their roster. With uncertainty around the Colts quarterback position and the Jaguars right now in their situation, if you hit on Cam Ward, you can easily vault yourself into wild card contention. Maybe the second place team in that division, because there's no clear two right now, in my opinion, with the quarterback decisions that are being made within the division. So I agree with you. I think you take Cam Ward, especially with some of the medical concerns I have right now with Abdul Carter and his injuries coming off this season.
Yeah, and the Texans are one injury away from being possibly a bottom 10 team in football with CJ Stroud. Because, I mean, they, as good as they are, they're not built to withstand any level of success without CJ Stroud in the lineup. So that division, I mean, it's not necessarily up for grabs unless disaster occurs in Houston, but it's not, the door's not entirely closed either.
I would agree. All right, let's move to another team in the AFC South. What's your first question for me?
My first question for you is on the Jacksonville Jaguars, on that same note. So, under new coach Liam Cohen from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, what is needed for Trevor Lawrence to ascend into the elite tier of QBs in the AFC? So, just to paint a clear picture here, that's the clear four guys, that you always hear. Mahomes, Jackson, Allen, Burrow.
Well, from a winning standpoint, a lot's going to be needed this season in the short term on this roster, in my opinion, to get him to the playoffs and to compete on that level of Lamar, Mahomes, even a Joe Burrow, who in a Bengals season which went the wrong way, they still were able to win 9 games and barely missed the playoffs. They've got their two receivers locked up for the long term, by the way. That was news that broke earlier this week with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins getting paid. Way to figure that out for the Bengals. But then again, I go back to who's playing defense on that team next year. I have no idea. They're going to have to figure out the Trey Hendrickson deal. That's another story for another day. In limited action this past season because of his injury to his shoulder, which I think affected his play. And he got a surgery this offseason to fix that. Hopefully he comes back healthy. That's the number one thing. He got to stay healthy. Because I don't think he was healthy at all last year. But in the limited action, we did see Trevor Lawrence. He was on pace to finish with a career high in air yards per pass attempt, completed air yards per attempt, and completed air yards per completion. So he was pushing the ball downfield, and he was throwing the deep ball really, really well. He was actually one of the better deep ball throwers in the league last year. According to Sports Illustrated, Lawrence had an excellent passer rating when throwing the ball down the field. I think it's a trait that Liam Cohen himself is going to like. When targeting receivers 20 or more yards down the field, Lawrence had a passer rating of 102.92. It's actually very consistent and very good in that respect. Brian Thomas Jr., an explosive player like himself, helps in that department. Where he was not good, though, was anywhere else. In the short to intermediate ranges of the field, Lawrence's passer rating dropped significantly. In the short 84.72, intermediate 75.33. It's easy to see why that Jaguars offense took so many deep shots this past season. He's going to have to be better with his accuracy in the short to intermediate game to even sniff a guy like Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. Because he wasn't good last year. And hey, maybe his shoulder injury had something to do with that. He had success throwing the ball deep. He's got, I think, all the tools you need still to live up to his number one overall draft pick and the hype that was around Trevor Lawrence coming out of Clemson. But his passer rating in both those areas ranked 26 out of 36 qualified quarterbacks this past year. That's far from where you need to be an elite quarterback. So the one thing I want to see from Trevor Lawrence is just more consistency on a game-to-game basis, throwing in the short to intermediate parts of the field. But sometimes his decision-making and just flat-out accuracy was not good. And then the Jaguars need to surround him with more talent. Because right now, I looked it up, their receiving room is Brian Thomas Jr., Diami Brown, and a lot of nothing as of right now. Unless I'm missing something. So
Parker Washington, maybe a young deep threat, kind of.
Maybe, but you need more than that.
But that's a stretch.
You need more than that to get anywhere in the AFC. But the main thing for Trevor Lawrence himself, and maybe Liam Cohen's the guy to fix this. And I'm glad that they hired a young offensive mind that's innovative and that's helped other quarterbacks, succeed. The main example being, of course, Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay. I think that's the main thing for Trevor Lawrence. You got to be better in the short to intermediate parts of the field, because just throwing the ball deep in this league it can work, but it's not. You got to be good everywhere else to be an elite quarterback. 26 in the league isn't cutting it. So I think they undoubtedly have one of the more talented quarterbacks in the league, but their roster, I think, is lacking for the amount of talent that Trevor Lawrence needs to get to that level, and he was lacking in certain areas of his game last year, in the past couple of years, that aren't going to put him near the same conversation as as those guys. So that's my opinion. But I'm excited to see what Trevor Lawrence brings this season.
Yeah, and the last the one thing that I'll mention to add to your point on Trevor getting more help is that defense was very quietly very shit. Very, very shit. Um like I really don't have any other way to say that. Like you probably like you ask people on the street like, oh, the Jaguars defense, I mean they're okay. I mean they're all right, but no, like the numbers say otherwise. They have a lot of work to do on that side of the ball, and they still are waiting on Trayvon Walker to quote unquote break out in terms of a consistent basis, at least. Um, they they have a lot of work to do for sure. So
They need to start.
we'll see how things go.
They need to start hitting on their drafts, and hopefully,
Yes.
a new general manager in a new front office will change that. Because, to be honest with you, their drafts haven't been very good, and that won't get you very far. Moving from the AFC South to the NFC South now. Let's talk about those Atlanta Falcons. We saw a small dose of Michael Penix Jr. last year when they put him in later on in the season in place of Kirk Cousins, who was underperforming. What do you think are realistic expectations for Penix Jr. in his first full year as a starter in Atlanta, given his surroundings? And I guess give us an answer from a personal standpoint. Like, what would you like to see himself as a quarterback accomplish? And then from a team standpoint for the Falcons, where do you think, what would be deemed a success for Penix this year?
Well, I think for Penix, based on what we've seen so far, I mean the expectations are certainly there. He showed, very solid play. I would even call it good play for a first time starting rookie late in the season. Um, and obviously the stakes in those games, especially that last game, weren't the highest, but that was a team that still had a shot to make the playoffs for all the way up until week 17, week 18. So the stakes were there, and he, for the most part, delivered on his part of the bargain. So I hope for that to continue. I think he showed that he can step into a pressure-packed situation and play well. And losing his center, Drew Dahlman, and, stepping into a full year as a starter, I think the difference will be, can he get the most out of their pass catchers, particularly, and I know this dude's a meme at this point, but Kyle Pitts, can we finally get, fourth overall pick Kyle Pitts to really hit? I mean, they passed on Jamar Chase and Penei Sewell to draft Kyle Pitts. Like they need more out of him. And beyond that, I just think just being in the mix again, like can he get the Falcons to where Kirk Cousins got them, and maybe even beyond that if, the defense plays a little better, because the defense wasn't up to, the expectations we had set for them last year. Their pass rush was simply too much for that secondary to overcome.
One of the things I found interesting with Atlanta last year was the breakout season that Drake London had. I thought he had a fantastic year. Can Michael Penix Jr. maximize the weapons that he has around him? I think that's a fantastic point. I want to see the decision making in the ball placement that we saw from him at Washington and many other stops in his college career, most of which were actually cut short by injuries multiple leg injuries when he was at, starting out at Indiana. Hopefully
Yeah.
he can stay healthy. But at Washington, I mean, the ball placement and the quick decision making as a lefty, which I really like because I'm a lefty myself. Um, if we can see that, and he's got plenty of talent around him, and they can maximize the run game with Bijan Robinson, this Atlanta team could do something in a division where you have Tampa Bay, who's looking to still be competitive, and then a couple rebuilding teams in the Saints and the Panthers. Um, but it's a division that you can win if Michael Penix hits. So I'm excited for Michael Penix. He was one of my favorite stories of college football. When he was coming out at Washington, we know what he did to that Texas secondary in that college football playoff game. So yeah, I think he'll definitely be a storyline when we get to training camp. And he'll be looking to kind of play with a chip on his shoulder, I'm guessing, because a lot of people did not like and push back on the idea of drafting him at, I think it was pick 8 last year,
Yeah.
when you already had signed Kirk Cousins. I think the Falcons kept Kirk Cousins on the roster. They have not traded
They
him yet,
did.
and that guarantee kicked in. So I guess he's a really expensive backup right now. But that's certainly an interesting situation how that all played
It
out.
really is. Yeah.
But I mean, if Michael Penix hits, you've got a rookie quarterback on a rookie deal for at least the next 3 years before you got to think about potentially paying him. So, and by that time, at
Right.
least you'll be out of the Kirk Cousins deal because they front loaded that thing to where they can get out of it. I think after this year pretty easily. And so if Michael Penix is the guy, that's great for Atlanta because then you got your franchise quarterback. You don't have to pay him for the next 2 years, and you can really start to build this roster around him to try to
Yeah, that
capitalize on
cap
a
space is
window.
going to open up.
Yep.
One last thing I want to see from Michael Penix is I want to see this dude's hairline.
Yeah.
Bijan Robinson was on the record saying that this dude never takes off his do rag. Like, what is this? What is this guy hiding, bro? Is he bald? Is he hiding like the most exquisite fucking Paul Georgian hairline of all time? What's the deal, man? Like he's going into the locker room and showering in his do rag. Like, what's up with that?
I don't know. Interesting stuff. Not something I'm gonna speak on at this very moment, but it's an interesting thought. Um, let's move to another team in the NFC South. What do you got for me?
All right, I got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Their need at corner is very well documented, and I think you could ask any NFL fan and ask them what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers need, and they would say corner. So rounds 1 and 2, who do you think the Bucs should target?
Well, there are a couple names I'll mention here, and I only consider corners because that's what the question is. In the second round, if they can get him at pick 53, a guy who's I think rising coming off his performance in Indianapolis at the combine where he ran a 4.28 out of Kentucky, Maxwell Harrison. More I watch this kid, the more I like him. Um, Fastest time of any player at the combine. He registered a 4.28 as I mentioned. Uh, he plays bigger than I think his listed size. And in zone coverage, this kid is a ball hawking specialist. He's intellectual, he's intelligent, really anticipatory in coverage. If you want to try to create more takeaways and you want a playmaker in your back end, which I think the Buccaneers could use, he's ascending up draft boards. Will he be available at 53? I don't know, but it's a target that I think could be in that range. Another guy in the second round that I guess maybe could could fall there would be Azariah Thomas, who I think maybe is the most underrated of all these corners in this class. The guy I'm really high on. I think he'll be borderline early second round. Maybe he sneaks into the back end of the first, but Maxwell Harrison would be the guy I think of in that second round range. And then two guys I think could be options in the first would be Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame. Um, he slid a little bit primarily because of his season-ending injury. I don't really know where his draft stock actually is right now. But at 19, I mean, he's got natural fluidity. He's highly intelligent. He's got scheme versatility. It's just how do the medicals test out? They would know better than we do inside that organization. I know they met with Benjamin Morrison at the combine, so they're at least talking to him. Is he fully recovered from that hip injury? The interesting thing about that is, as a corner, you really got to have good fluidity in your hips. That's an important part of the body when playing corner.
Yeah.
And he's coming off a
Especially a
hip
big
injury.
corner like him.
Yeah, in a big corner like he is. I like the size and plugging him into that Todd Bowles defense. He's a polished outside corner, which I think would be capable of picking up a defense like the Todd Bowles defense early in his career. It could be exactly what the doctor ordered for the Buccaneers, but what do the medicals look like, and are you confident that he could contribute early? And the other guy who also has some medical questions is Siobhan Revell Jr., who's just an absolute, toolsy
Freak show.
At 6'3", 190, 200, somewhere in that range. He's very tantalizing as a prospect with his unique combination of length and instincts and athleticism. And I think had he not torn his ACL in September, he might be, up there with Jahdae Barron as potentially one of the top corner prospects in this entire draft with his tools. Played a modest amount for East Carolina this past season given that injury, but I've seen a lot of people compare him and Kenyon Mitchell, who faced similar questions last year based on his attributes and level of competition. I'd probably favor Benjamin Morrison at 19, but I don't know. Either guy, you're bringing into a lot of questions about health. But those would be kind of the guys I'm looking at. They need to add depth regardless. I wouldn't mind the Buccaneers adding two defensive backs in this draft, if I'm being completely honest with you. Because they had some injury issues last year in that room. They need help. Those are names that come to mind. Do you have anyone else you want to mention? I don't think they can get Jahdae Barron at 19. I don't think he's not falling that far.
No, I don't have anyone, but I do want to add on to your Maxwell Harrison point. I really love that fit just because you look at what the Bucs were able to do with Zion McCollum as a athletic, freaky 5th round pick, developmental guy. He's turned into a high level starting corner and a guy that if he were to hit the open market next year is going to be in the $25, $26 million range, given how the corner market has shaken out. So I really like that fit. I think he has some tackling concerns at that size for sure. But,
yep.
I mean, Todd Bowles and that coaching staff, there's not a whole lot of spots where I'd feel more confident in a coaching staff, working with a guy on that.
Yeah, if he's there at 53, I'd take him. I think if you look at most mock drafts right now, you'll see Jahad Campbell, the linebacker out of Alabama, mocked to Tampa Bay. I've seen Jalen Walker, the edge rusher out of Georgia, mocked to Tampa Bay. I've seen a couple other positions. I've seen James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee, mocked to Tampa Bay. Haven't seen corner, but if they do go corner, I think Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame's a name to watch. But I honestly I'd go second round and try to get Harrison at a better
Yeah,
value.
yeah,
Harrison.
and Benjamin Morrison is giving some Kyle Hamilton vibes in the way that like it seems like people are kind of overthinking it. Like, dude is
Yeah.
just flat out a great football player.
Yeah. Yep. Coming from that system under Marcus Freeman, coached by Al Golden, who's now the defensive coordinator with the Cincinnati Bengals in the NFL. Like one of the more underrated players in college football this past year. One of the best players in that title game, period. So
Yep.
there are a lot of options for Tampa Bay. I'll say that. My next question for you. NFC East. This is a really interesting question. I'm really excited to hear your answer to this. Do you think that filling the shoes of offensive coordinator Kellen Moore in Philadelphia is possibly one of the most underrated, consequential storylines in the entire NFL?
Yes, simple. Yeah, simple as that. I think if if their replacement hits and their replacement, I have the name written down here. Help me out here. I'm not seeing it. Anyways, their replacement, they hired their QB coach and their associate head coach last year. If that hits, if they continue to kind of churn things out, I think there's even a ceiling beyond what Kellen Moore was able to do for this offense. Kellen Moore specialized in passing game creativity, and that's really what he was brought in for. But you saw the running game flourish last year and what it was really capable of. So there's a chance you switch offensive coordinators and maybe you get more out of this running game. You have a full offseason to, conjure up some, devious run schemes with Saquon in the backfield and a healthy Jalen Hurts running the ball. I mean, I'm not ruling that out. And of course the other side of this and why it's so important is if it goes the other way, the Eagles team that we saw the year before this year, I mean, the last, however many weeks of the season, I think it was 8 weeks of the season, I think they were like 1-7 or something ridiculous like that. So I don't think that would be that level of bad, but I think it's the difference between them being the Super Bowl favorites and being in the hunt, I think.
Kevin Patullo, their passing game coordinator, was promoted to offensive coordinator. That's the name that we were looking for here. After Kellen Moore left after the Super Bowl to be the New Orleans Saints head coach, which I find so funny because that was just completely like swept under the rug. Nobody really cared about it at the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think one of the interesting, underrated parts of this is not only the fact that they promoted Patullo, who's been the team's passing game coordinator since 2021 and has also held the title of associate head coach this past year. So he's pretty highly thought of in that organization, which I find interesting because it's a well-run organization, obviously. It's not an organization that, I mean, if he was highly thought of in, say, like the Jaguars I'm not trying to throw strays at the Jaguars. Obviously, I kind of am, but whatever. Screw it. If he was highly thought of in the Jaguars organization, it's just different than being highly thought of in the Eagles organization. These are two different entities we're talking about. So I find that interesting. I think the element of continuity here, maybe in the passing game, is interesting for a guy like Jalen Hurts and the parts of this Eagles offense since he's been around a while. But one of the interesting things to me is they actually brought in Dolphins offensive assistant Parks Frazier to be the new passing game coordinator to reunite with Nick Sirianni, and he's coming from the I guess the Mike McDaniel tree, who comes from the Sean McVay tree. So it's all like this inner circle of connections that I find really interesting. Maybe Parks Frazier brings a new wrinkle to this passing game. And maybe Kevin Patullo is the new rising star in the offensive new young offensive mind. It seems like
It's
he's
very
gotten
possible.
endorsements from Nick Sirianni and I believe Eagles' former offensive coordinator Shane Steichen, really smart guy, now coaching the Indianapolis Colts. A lot of people like this guy, and all I can really do is you know take them for their words because they've been in the organization. They know this dude. So I hopefully it works out. If it doesn't, I think you're right. I think the Lions are primed to take that final step to the Super Bowl if they're healthy. Their defense is healthy. You got the Commanders on the up and up within your own division with a star quarterback. Um, you know, the Bears, if they can figure their shit out with Ben Johnson, they're adding talent all on the offensive and defensive lines. The Packers, if Jordan Love
Packers, yeah.
figures his shit out. The Rams aren't going anywhere anytime soon as long as Matthew Stafford is there. This hire needs to work, but who am I to doubt an organization that has won 2 Super Bowls in the last 6 years? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
All right, what's up next for me in the NFC East? What are we talking about now?
The New York Giants is who we're talking about now. My question for you on the Giants. Would it make more sense for the Giants to trade up for Cam Ward than signing a veteran? How much would it take? Like what? Well, for one, how much would it take, and also, would it be worth it?
If I'm the Giants, and where are they picking right now? They're at 3, right? That's where
They're
they're
at 3.
slotted.
Yep.
The Titans are
Mm-hmm.
at 1. So you're trading up only 2 spots. So in theory, if you just think about it from that perspective, it shouldn't take like a super haul. But at the same time, you're trading up past the Cleveland Browns, who need a quarterback, and you're trading up with the Titans, who also could be looking for Cam Ward at that spot. So it's not just trading up 2 spots, it's trading up past 2 other needy quarterback desperate teams at this moment in time. Maybe the Titans
Yep.
are a little less desperate than the Browns are, but you get the point. In my opinion, it would be worth it to take a shot in the dark at Cam Ward. I love this talent. I think he's the best quarterback in the class. I'd rather have him than Shador Sanders. I'd rather have him than any other quarterback at any other point in this draft because I just don't love any of the other guys. You get him on a rookie deal. Do I want Cam Ward on a rookie deal to try to build around him, or do I want to deal with Aaron Rodgers on a team that with a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback? I just don't believe you're moving the needle very far with that move, or Joe Flacco or Jameis Winston, whoever it is. I'd rather trade up, and I think you could get I think you could get up to number 1 with Tennessee if you give them a first, if you give them your first, so you give them the number 3 pick, you give them your second round pick, you give them a late round pick, maybe like a 5th or a 6th, and then like a 3rd round pick next year. I think that gets it done, or at least gets the conversation rolling. And I think it'd be worth it because I'm afraid that if you don't hit on the quarterback this year and you don't find that long-term solution, then Brian Dable is going to be shit out of luck with his job in New York. And I like Brian Dable. I think that guy will get another opportunity if things don't work out. But they need to take a big swing, and I would do anything in my power to try to make that happen. But that's just me. I would rather do that than Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, or whoever else is on the market right now.
Yeah, um, and I know that I said earlier that if I were the Titans, I'd take Cam Ward. If I were a betting man, I think this trade will happen. I think for both sides, you look at it for the Giants' point of view, you go with Aaron Rodgers, you're looking at the same problems next year and maybe even further back in the draft. You're taking yourself out of the conversation for Arch Manning, all those quarterbacks next year that, I mean, we're speaking now in March, so take this with a grain of salt. Next year's quarterback class is just flat out better than this one. No question about it, whether Arch Manning declares or not. So for the Giants, I just think if you're not going to get Cam Ward, then, I mean, tank. And they can't do that. So get Cam Ward. They're just desperate. They have to do it. And then if you're the Titans, you're not ready, I don't think, to just, step up to the plate and win. And obviously they're going to have those conversations within their organization because they might think otherwise. But for me personally, I don't think you're quite ready and have the subsequent depth to, compete in the AFC in terms of wild card spot. So I like the idea of waiting on a Arch Manning or one of those, guys next year.
Yeah. Waiting on someone next year. I don't know if it's Arch Manning because I don't know if he's coming out next year, but there will be somebody. I mean, I can already think of a couple names right off the top of my head that will be better options than you can find this year. And if you're the Giants, like, you're in a tough spot because you have a head coach who's under a lot of pressure to win. But also, I don't believe you are a quarterback away from competing for a Super Bowl. Now, you might be a quarterback away from getting in the, like, sneaking into the playoffs, maybe. But that's not conducive to building towards the future. And you if you get the opportunity to do it, you do it. Take a big swing and get your next potentially franchise quarterback. A 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers, who, for all we know, could take until like August 3rd to sign at this point, at the rate he's going, or Russell Wilson, who's going to make up some stupid fucking slogan about the city of New York and talk about how this team can win a Super Bowl when they really can't. Like, give me a break, guys. Go with Cam Ward or just wait until next year. And I guess sign.
The sad part is that I really don't think Brian Daboll is that bad of a coach. I really do think he's a good coach. And I think if Brian Daboll gets fired next year, and I don't want to go too far off the rails here, but if Brian Daboll gets fired next year, he would get hired immediately by another team. So that says a lot.
Yeah. I'll take him in Pittsburgh. Anyway. All right, next question. Is it my turn to ask you? Yes. Right? Yeah. Cowboys.
Yep.
This is a Micah Parsons question that I'm interested to hear your answer on. And I also want to get your thoughts on the back and forth that there was between Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence the other day. Anyway, that's another story. Do you think the lack of continuity at defensive coordinator has negatively impacted the career arc or development of one Micah Parsons?
Well, I do think it has played a factor. Is the simple answer. You look at the turmoil that the Cowboys have been in within the offseason these past 2 years. Particularly last year, where you wait till week before your week 1 game to sign Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. I mean, you go the year before that even, and they basically did next to nothing in free agency, if I remember correctly. I mean, yeah, like the turmoil within the organization in general has played a big part in Micah Parsons not being, I'm not gonna say not improving. He has improved, but I think he hasn't been maximized. Is my thing, and I think continuity matters when you have a defensive coordinator and a defensive line coach that have been working in tandem to make systems to get the most out of a player, especially a player like Micah Parsons, who's essentially a chess piece. So I do think it has played a role. I mean, you go to Mike Zimmer after Dan Quinn leaves. Obviously, you couldn't have controlled Dan Quinn leaving. He was going to take the head coaching job eventually. But getting Mike Zimmer on a 1-year deal and basically just saying, if you don't win, you're fired. I mean, I don't think that was the best approach. And now you're having another offseason of installing a new defense now with Matt Eberflus. So,
Yeah.
yes, like I honestly talk myself into it a little bit. Yes, I think the answer is yes.
Do you think Micah Parsons gets the deal that he wants?
Ultimately, I do think so. I mean, with how much the cap has gone up every single year, I think this year it went up like 15 some percent or something, and then every year before that it goes up 10%. I mean, if you backload a contract to like 2029, you'll be fine. It's a lot of money to pay your top 3 guys, but I mean, you can't let go of Micah Parsons, dude. Like, it's just not, that doesn't happen in the NFL.
I agree. Did you have any thoughts on the little back and forth between DeMarcus Lawrence, who signed with, I think he signed in Seattle, and did you see that between Micah Parsons and
No, I
DeMarcus
did
Lawrence?
not actually. Fill me
Yeah.
in.
Well, it was just a little Twitter beef, just some entertaining stuff on the side where DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons were going back and forth about, you know, why the Cowboys weren't winning and this and that. It's not podcasts. Like, we don't need to spend a lot of time on it. But I thought if you're a Cowboys fan, you might be interested in going back and seeing what that was all about. Anyway, we
Yeah,
can
I'll check it out.
we can
I'm
move
not gonna
on.
like what I see, probably.
We can move
Yeah,
on
yeah. Let's
to
let's get on to the next one. Next question for you. Steelers question. Your team. So for the Steelers, outside of QB, is there a relatively affordable and available free agent that could make the Steelers better?
is there a relatively affordable available free agent that could make the Steelers better? Well, I okay, so if you look at what the Steelers have done so far in this offseason, they've they've traded for DK Metcalf, obviously. They've signed back Mason Rudolph to hopefully be a backup, but he could end up being their short-term starter plan, which I'd honestly rather see than Aaron Rodgers at this point in time. And they've really kind of gone after the secondary hard. They've reinvested in Darius Slay, who is 34 years old, but played really good football last year. I
Yep.
think on the football field, when comparing his production to Dante Jackson's, is an upgrade to Dante Jackson at that other corner spot last year. And I like the fact that he can come in and kind of mentor a guy like Corey Trice Jr., who's going into his third year, but Steelers really like this guy. They drafted him in the later rounds out of Purdue. Has shown flashes in like preseason and things of that nature, but just can't stay healthy. Maybe that turns into something for them, but it hasn't yet. They've really struggled at the corner spot opposite Joey Porter Jr. I like that veteran option on a 1 year, $10 million deal. Whatever. Steelers have a ton of cap space. If it doesn't work out, they're out of it next year. He's 35 next year anyway. Um, Hopefully, this move is more like the Joe Hayden move from a couple of years ago than the Patrick Peterson move from a year or two ago. That didn't really work out. And then they brought in a couple guys. They brought in Juan Thornhill yesterday from the Browns for some safety depth. I like that. I like this safety room right now with Minka and goodness.
DeMonte Casey, is he still
No,
there?
Juan Thornhill's
No.
replacing DeMonte Casey. The guy they brought in from Miami last year, who went to Texas. Gosh.
Oh,
I can't think of his name for whatever reason. And Deshaun Elliott.
damn it.
Sean Elliott.
Yeah.
Sean Elliott, who was one of the better players on their defense last year. Like, I like that safety room. I like the Juan Thornhill move for a cheap, younger option over DeMonte Casey. One of the guys I was really interested in at the start of this offseason for the Steelers was Asante Samuel Jr. And I wanted to bring him up here, but I think he's going to be too expensive in the end. Because I look at the moves that the Steelers have made, paying DK Metcalf the $30 million a year, still needing a quarterback. If you're going to sign Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, you're going to need $15, $20 million, I'm guessing, to sign one of those guys. That's probably what it's going to take at the end of the day. They need to save some money for if a potential free agent quarterback option becomes available. And I think even at this point, Asante Samuel Jr. is going to be a guy that gets into the double digit range per year, $10 to $12 million per year. I think he would be a great younger corner to take a chance on for Pittsburgh because of his versatility, some of the things that he's shown as a younger player. I would have interest in that as a Steelers fan, but I don't think that's going to be in their price range at this very moment in time. So I look at the open free agent market, and in terms of a guy you can bring in that would make this Steelers team better, maybe something along the offensive line for some depth, or the defensive line for some depth. I look at maybe, I take like a guy like Charles Omenihu. He's on the free agent market. I don't think the Chiefs have re-signed him yet. They need some depth on the defensive line. I don't think they go the receiver route. I think they're looking to the draft. Maybe like a Shaq Mason, who's I think available. Could bring him in.
Yeah.
I don't know who it's going to be though, honestly, because they're kind of in a situation that they've tied themselves up in. They've made their own bed here with this quarterback situation. So, unless you're going like a cheap Joe Flacco route, I don't know that any of these other real free agent signings that will actually elevate this team are going to make sense financially. Did you have any names in mind for Pittsburgh that you like personally?
Well, with all of the points you just mentioned with, allocating money for your draft picks as well and also still needing a quarterback, there's really not a whole ton of options. I think um, Demarcus Robinson was a name I was thinking about, but he signed already. He signed with the 49ers. I think O-line is probably what I would look at. I mean,
Yeah.
you lost what's his name? Your guard that got injured was out for the season, like midway through the year.
Oh,
James
James
Daniels,
Daniels.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, like you would probably need a James Daniels replacement somehow. Maybe you look to the draft for that, but actually, no, you do have McCormick replacing him, right?
Yeah, but I would like if you want to make this team better, you bring in veteran depth on the offensive line
Yeah,
to
yeah,
to at least compete with a guy like Mason McCormick. I think,
yeah. Maybe a swing interior player, maybe a Storm Norton.
and your tackles are set. Like we don't know how good it's going to be yet. You're moving Broderick Jones to left tackle. You're going to have Faltanu finally at right tackle. At least that's the plan right now. If Faltanu's healthy, hopefully he is, because that went south last year with his injury concerns. It's really the interior of this offensive line that's kind of a revolving door at this point. I really like Zach Frazier. I think they hit on that pick last year in the second round. McCormick was good at times, but yeah, you bring in someone on the interior because Siamalu is getting up there in age, and he's been hurt. You need depth there. If you want to make this team better, you get as much offensive line depth as you can.
For sure. Okay.
All right. My final question for you tonight is to do with JT Sanders. What do you think? Well, first of all, what was your main takeaway from his rookie season? And then, second of all, what in your mind would make a successful year two in the NFL for JT Sanders out of Texas?
Well, I think he flashed, some he had some awesome flashes, I think, is the main thing you have to take away from that rookie year. I think obviously the scary injury, the fact that he was, taken off on a cart, but then like he came back a few weeks later, I believe. I think it was a head injury. So we're looking all good on that, thank goodness. I remember watching that on Red Zone. That looked very scary. But I think the key thing with JT Sanders is the run after catch ability really, really showed itself on the NFL level, and that translated right away. It jumped off the page, and I think that's going to present something that has a ton of value in this Panthers offense. Like I don't see the Panthers, going out and getting a tight end to replace him at any time soon, because I think they really do see him as a key part of this core on the offensive side of the ball. So year two, I think, continue to build trust with Bryce Young, and I think just continue to extend your route tree. I think I'd like to see him, work the deeper parts of the field a little bit more, and obviously that comes with the development of Bryce Young as well. But that's really the main thing. He works those short to intermediate routes pretty well already, and he has that run after catch ability. Those deeper routes, I think, working the post, working maybe a 7 route to the sideline here and there as a tight end. That those routes have a ton of value as a big target.
Absolutely. The main thing for him is just getting healthy and then the Panthers being able to correctly utilize his talents. The deep parts of the field, though, that'd be dangerous because JT Sanders is a guy that coming out of high school played multiple positions in high school, was even a guy that played, I think, along the defensive line in high school
Mm-hmm.
because of how athletic and just big he is and strong that he is. Really strong hands, and he displayed that at Texas. You just got to be able to utilize him in the right way. There's a reason he was a 5-star. Didn't I think one of the reasons he didn't end up going higher in the draft was because he really had a dud of a combine. Didn't test well at all. Kind of like Gunnar Helm, who also didn't test well. But that was, I think, part because of his ankle injury. The pro day for Gunnar Helm is going to be really important. The talent though is in there for JT Sanders. It's just being healthy and then Bryce Young and him finding that chemistry. So I'm rooting for him for sure. Let's get to our last question of the day. This is an important recruiting update you're not going to want to miss to wrap up tonight's football podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, question for you. What's the latest status on 5-star QB Diabell's commitment to Texas? Is there any reason to worry about him not sticking?
For those unfamiliar to recruiting, when I say not sticking, that means, is there any reason to believe he won't sign in December? Because nothing in the world of college football recruiting these days is ever locked in until they sign on signing day in December. Especially in this world of NIL and the transfer portal.
Yeah, putting pen to paper.
Yeah. Diabell, he just got his 5th star by a couple services. So he's now a 5-star quarterback. That's big for Texas, number one. Number two, he's from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. American heritage. It's southern part of Florida. Really talented high school football down there. It's a really talented, ripe state for high school football talent. And Diabell's one of the best quarterbacks in this class. He's healthy, he's competing, and he's completely locked in to his commitment to Texas as of right now. He's 6'2", 6'3", 205 pounds, and he's told multiple local team sources that cover the program that he's locked in to Texas. Now, that's not to say that couldn't change going into the summer when official visit season arrives. When these players take their official visits in June and July and commitments start to really pick up going into their senior seasons, right? Because he'll be going into his senior season at American Heritage, getting ready to play his final season of high school football before he gets to campus next January as an early enrollee. Typically, a lot of these big-time players want to get their commitments out of the way before their season starts so that they can focus on just playing football. Luckily for Diabell, he doesn't have to worry about that because he committed last summer. So he's been committed for all this time. There are schools coming after him, making those phone calls, particularly schools in the Southeast, to the Alabama and Georgia being the main ones in the SEC who are coming after him hard. LSU is also taking a look at him. So is Ohio State. All these big programs are coming after Diabell because he's that kind of prospect. But he's locked into Texas, and I said this, I think, a month or two ago on one of these podcasts. Until he steps foot on another campus that's not the University of Texas, you don't need to worry about this kid. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He's got good people, I think, in his ear. His dad, Rajah Bell, was a professional athlete. He comes from a good family. He's got good pedigree. He's a really good quarterback, a really good football player. And when it comes to Steve Sarkisian and recruiting quarterbacks, I don't think any Texas fan nor anybody period should ever worry about their plan at quarterback beyond going into this year or going into future years. Because typically Sark identifies his quarterback a year early and he gets his guy And more often than not, he's right. They could have opted to go after Keelan Russell this past cycle, who's a 5-star out of Duncanville. Played with DeCorian Moore. But instead, he stayed firm in his commitment to KJ Lacey. And KJ Lacey stayed firm in his commitment to Texas. I think Diabell is better than KJ Lacey. So that'll be an interesting dynamic once Diabell gets to campus in January and those two guys start competing for kind of the future after Arch. But don't worry about Diabell. Like, I believe that guy is going to be a Texas Longhorn until that changes.
That's good to hear, for sure. That's really good to hear. Do you have anything to add in terms of, like, Miami being a threat or Florida being a threat? Like, who would be the threats, do you think?
I've heard Alabama and Georgia as the main threats here. Those are two programs that right now are still in search of their guy for 2026. I think Georgia is a bigger threat than Alabama because Alabama just got a 5-star quarterback in this past class with Keelan Russell, who could start at Alabama this year. Who knows? If he beats out their current guy, I'm blanking on his name. But Georgia is in need of a quarterback. I could see Miami or Florida getting into the race, but at this point, like, I think it's too late, and those programs already have plans at quarterback. So I don't think you need to. Don't worry about it until he starts taking official visits to any of those other schools. Until that happens, there's no reason to worry, and that guy's going to be a Texas Longhorn. And at this point, typically, this is the last thing I'll add. Texas really likes to slow play recruiting. Sarkisian's whole strategy is, his whole philosophy is, I would rather play offense and be chasing these commitments later on in the year when it's closer to signing day than get the commitments now and have to babysit these commitments all for the next 8 months up until December. Have to fend off all these other suitors who are trying to come flip these commitments. Right now, Texas has 3 commitments. And they're like, if you look at the recruiting rankings in March, they're like ranked in the 30s for the 2026 class. But they were at the same spot last year and the year before that. They just don't like taking a lot of early commitments because then you have to constantly like worry about your commits taking official visits to other schools and having other schools try to flip those guys. Sark likes to kind of play the long game. And I think once we get into the month of May is when you'll start to kind of see commitments start to pick up because that's typically when Texas recruiting momentum really starts to pick up. But I don't bet against Sark because this is a strategy that has landed him 4 straight top 5 classes and a number 1 class this past year. So who am I to doubt him?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the resume speaks for itself at this point.
But Diabell, if I have to bet on one guy to be the guy after Arch Manning, Trey Owens, KJ Lacey, Diabell, I'm betting on Diabell.
I think so too, man. Based on what I've seen, the dual threat ability and plus the size, and the fact that he's the son of an athlete and has the mindset that comes with that, obviously. Those intangible things are so important, and especially to Sark, who won out in the recruiting of Arch Manning, and obviously, Arch is a Manning, so everybody wants him, but like Arch is Arch because of those things, because of those intangible things that are instilled in him from the Mannings.
Yep. And Dia, believe me, he's well set up from a NIL standpoint. So, I don't think you have to worry about that either.
Yeah.
But that's gonna do it. Again, there's still a lot going on in the recruiting world, so we'll get into that over the next couple weeks. It'll definitely pick up once we get past the draft. Like in the summer, we'll have a lot of recruiting content because then we'll be past the draft, we'll be past March Madness. And we'll be into the summer where, yes, the NBA is going on and stuff of that nature, but after the draft, the NFL will die down a little bit, at least for a couple weeks, and we'll be able to kind of really get into some other things.
Yeah.
But we are like in the coming weeks, you do have to look forward to, like in the coming football episodes, spring football intel. A week from right now, a week from today is actually Texas's first spring practice. So we're getting to that time where we're getting spring intel. We're gonna be hearing things on different players inside the program and different. We did our spring depth chart projections last week, so go check that out and all the other content we have on the channel. But you do have to look forward to Arch Manning updates and Ryan Wingo updates and things of that nature if you're a Texas football,
Right.
college football fan. That's going to do it for this episode of the Raw Prospect Football Podcast, Football Edition. Up next, as we mentioned earlier tonight, we have our 2025 March Madness Bracket Breakdown Special. We only do it once a year, and we're going to do it tonight. We're going to break down the entire bracket, our picks, and what we're looking forward to in this year's tournament, what we're watching for, and all sorts of things of that nature. So you'll definitely want to tune in. But this episode itself will be out here in the next 48 to 72 hours. We hope you guys enjoy. Emmy, any parting shots before we sign off?
Enjoy March Madness, y'all. Only comes once a year, so watch as much of it as possible. And don't listen to anyone's advice on, oh, like just wait till the Sweet 16. Oh, there's just wait till no. The first weekend is the time to just sit on a couch, all right? That is, pure Americanism.
Yeah, I have a couple things to get off my chest at the beginning of the next episode, some of which has to do with college basketball. Well, all of it has to do with college basketball, but a lot of it has to do with like the mainstream media and how they talk about college basketball. I'll talk about that at the end of the next episode. You'll just have to tune in to hear my kind of rant on that. Here's what I'll say. As John Fanta so eloquently put it on the Field of 68 After Dark on Sunday, on their Selection Sunday reaction special. If you're working on Thursday or Friday, you're an idiot. Peace out.
I'm an idiot, guys.